Welcome to this week's episode of My Big Break Almost podcast, and we are going to have longtime actor Mitchell Fink. You may not recognize the name, but you are going to recognize this guy when you see him. He's been on so many shows.
And he lives in California, so it's easy.
It's easy. Yeah, he just walks out of his door and he's on a show instantly.
Sure, everyone is. They live in California. They're always on shows.
They're all celebrities, millions of celebrities in California, including Mitchell.
Just uncredited.
But this guy is credited, from soap operas to comedy to dramas.
Yes.
He's pretty much done it all.
Mm-hmm. All being colorblind, too.
That's right. Again, I think most guys are.
I don't know why that would be an issue with acting.
The scripts must be in black and white.
But it was on his IMDb, so...
So it must be true.
It must be.
And we must ask him about it. Coming up right after this. We are talking with Mitchell Fink, the actor, and for now, the self-quarantined actor inside of a hotel room while all this coronavirus chaos kind of goes on. So how are things in isolation for you?
Things in isolation are good. I self-quarantined only. So the end of 2018, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive lymphoma in my immune system. So I spent the better part of 7 months in an inpatient chemo, in and out. I would go in for about 6 days. I'd be home for like 12 days, start to feel better after like day 10, and then I'd go back in and do it again. And I did that for the better part of six and a half months, almost 7 months. So my immune system isn't 100%. So when my daughter gets a cold and the coronavirus is doing what the coronavirus is doing to everybody, my wife and I were like, you know what? You can just go spend a couple of days in the hotel till, she feels better. So you don't get a cold and then top off on top of the, with the coronavirus. So it's nice. I mean, like a continental breakfast, who doesn't love a good continental breakfast? And, at the end of the day, it's fun. A lot of TV, a lot of movie watching.
So were you able to act during that 7 months, or did you just have to take a break for a while?
Man, I wish I could have acted. I thought I looked amazing. Like, I was like, oh, I don't look so bad with no hair. Like, who needs eyebrows, really, right?
You said you didn't look good.
Well, I thought I looked great. I would send a selfie to my manager once in a while, and I'd be home for like that 2 weeks, and I'd be like, hey, if there's anything that comes up, let me know. I'll totally be available. And he looked at me, he's like, no. So it was really interesting. I'd had kind of and you guys talked a ton of actors, so like it's an ebb and a flow, and I was really in a bad ebb prior to getting diagnosed. To the point I was like, God, what am I doing? Like, am I any good at this anymore? Like, is it worth doing? I love it, but and then this happened, and I just basically said, I'm done. If something really crazy comes up and somebody's like, hey, we need a cancer patient for a TV show, I could show up and just lay there for a couple of days. But I really just spent a ton of time reading, taking care of myself mentally, and then I didn't do anything for 7 months. The best story about all of it was during the course of it, you really start to understand how much you love what you do, and then it's gone. I loved acting, but I was having a bad patch, and I was like, God, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I just go back to corporate America and get a job. And I was like, no, I really love it. Like, I really love it. And it sucks that I don't get to do it right now. So when I get back to doing it, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to do what feels good in the room. I'm not going to try to please anybody. And the first audition back July, I had maybe end of July, I think it was. I had some really, really short hair. I went in and I booked the recurring role on Bosch for the upcoming season. So I was able to do that first job back. So I did that all last fall.
Oh, wow.
That is great.
That's fantastic. It kind of gives you some reassurance. Yeah, I still got it.
Yeah. And then, of course, when it ends, you're like, nobody's ever going to hire you know. But it was great. I mean, it was, and I think it's helped my appointments. It's helped me kind of handle the ups and downs of the business. Like, you know, you realize how much you love it, and I think, you know, that's part of what I signed up for.
So apparently, I'm stating the obvious. It sounds like this is a huge roller coaster ride to be a professional actor.
Very much so, yes. I always tell people when they call, like, hey, my son wants to be an actor, my daughter wants to be an actor, right? I said, well, okay, I'm sorry. And I always tell, like, my friends with kids, I'm like, learn a trade or do something else first and make sure that you still are, like, you know, dying to go to the theater, dying to put together a character. Because the reality is most of the time in this profession, you're not working unless you're really, really one of the fortunate ones who are the top of the industry. Some obscene number, I think a few years ago, and I don't know if it's still even accurate, was I think if you make over, I think $70,000 a year, you're in the top 5% of your union, which is insane to think about that, particularly living in LA or New York, where the majority of the industry is. $70,000 if you're living in maybe New Orleans or Atlanta is decent, you know, but here you're kind of like, well, how do I get through the day? So you have to just kind of ride the roller coaster, not take it personally, and understand that, like, when they call you in, you've done your job, like you've done enough work, or your people believe in you enough to get you in a room to read for a job.
Man, does your wife work, or does she kind of, whenever you're down, you know, she picks it up?
I got so lucky. I married a real person. I married like a person with like a real job, and like she has like a legitimate, you know, adult position at a really cool company, and she does good for the world. And so we have a stable income on top of whatever I do on the side. I've been very fortunate to be able to make a living doing it, but I've always kept extra income coming in from various different ways.
That's really awesome, because your line of work, like you said, you're up and then you're down, to have someone else to kind of help support. That's
right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome. She gets it. You know, I think she understands that, and she believes in me, which is huge.
So how old is your daughter?
3 years old.
Okay.
Oof.
So does she get it when she sees dad in the TV box? Does she understand, or is it still puzzling to her?
No clue. Cannot for the life of her figure out why I'm on TV. Like, can't, like, just doesn't understand it. Like, we've watched a few things and she's like, Daddy. And she's like, oh, like, and then she's like, give me the phone. I want to be on TV too. So she thinks, like, if I just like hold the phone, like that's the equivalent of being on television. So
that's funny.
I would think that, you know, she would assume that you had a twin somewhere. You
Right,
know?
right. The best part is my wife is amazing. She says, you know, you put yourself on tape for something, and I'll come home and watch it, you know, on my phone before I send it to my representatives, and I'll watch it, and my daughter will come over and say, "Oh, Daddy," and Mommy says, "Doesn't Daddy look handsome?" You know, and she's like, "Daddy, you look great." And I was like, "Thanks, I'm gonna hit send." Send it right to my Mac.
That's so sweet. Now, so you are one of the people that actually do watch their shows, because we have talked to a few people that they're like, no, I'll never watch myself on camera, not doing it.
I don't watch the finished product very often. I will watch an audition.
Oh, okay.
You mean you don't play it on a loop in your house constantly? This is me on CSI.
What kind of crazy person do you think I am? No, I don't do it. I will watch the audition because I'm sending it to my manager, and I want them, you know, if they say something about it, like, hey, you know, I didn't like this, or can you retape it with this kind of beat? They're asking for this. Then I kind of want to know what he's looking at. But I've learned that, like, when you see it on TV, there's only so much you can control, editing, and, you know, how they edit it and who gets what coverage. And years ago, I did a guest star on a show called The Unit. I don't know how I got it. It was a horrible audition. I get this job, and I'm a part of the unit. I'm like a guy in the unit. And I remember I was like, God, I'm having fun. I worked for a few days. It was great. It was like being in a frat house. I mean, it's just a bunch of guys playing war, right? Um, and I ran into a buddy of mine. He's like, oh, hey, I'm working part-time in post-production on that show. And I said, that's really cool. He's like, I saw your coverage. And I said, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you looked great. And I was like, yeah, they edited out a bunch of stuff. He's like, oh, man, you know how that works. And I learned literally they can make you look like the star of the show, or they can make you look like a guy who just showed up for a couple days to work. So when you see it, you know that, you did your job, but obviously they have to make sure that, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the call sheet are getting their camera time, which is why they're getting paid all that money.
Man, it must be hard for family too. You call them up and say, hey, I'm going to be on a show and I'm going to be famous. And your parents are just so proud, even if you like walk across the screen.
Yep. Yeah.
I picture that Friends episode with Joey when he was trying to foil his grandma and they had to recreate the scene because they edited him out.
Right. But here's what's funny is to the outside world, people are like, oh, I thought you'd have a bigger part. And I'm like,
thanks.
I just got paid to be on television. You know what I mean? Like, and what's crazy about it is it's so hard to get a job. Like, it's not hard, but I mean, there's a lot of mechanics that go into getting anything. 1 line, 2 lines, a series, it's insane. Anybody who's on television being paid to act and has to speak a line, like, kudos to you, right? Like, I mean, you did it. You got on TV. It's a huge accomplishment. So I'm always like 1 line, 2 line. I don't care. Like, I'm on. You know what I mean? Right. And yeah, but sometimes friends who aren't in the business are kind of like, oh, I thought you'd be on more. I'm like, come on, man. Like,
you'd be a nicer friend. We were both wrong.
I mean, really, buddy, really.
Well, in this day and age, it's really funny because basically a normal person with a normal job can go on YouTube and do one small little thing and all of a sudden they're a sensation. And it's like a snowball effect. They didn't, even sign up for it. So have you ever thought about if maybe acting in the times that you're kind of having your down days and you don't have a job right now, have you ever thought about doing like a YouTube channel or something that, on the side that can make a little extra? No.
I'm horribly shy in that way.
Really?
Yeah. Acting is a cloak, right? You're wearing a costume. I'm generally very personable with my friends, but I generally would prefer to be quiet and home and not have people watching me in my living room doing something, So that for me has always been weird. People are like, you should do it. I'm like, I'm good. I'll do other things, like I'll keep myself busy.
Is your daughter shy?
Not shy. She's very aware and takes her time. She reminds me a lot of me. Like, once she's engaged, she's in. But you got to kind of earn that engagement.
When you were talking about the auditions, you said that you would videotape and send it in. I always picture the old-fashioned cattle call auditions where they would have 50 to 100 actors come in. You just line up and you do your little spill and they record it on the old VHS tape and then you walk out the door. What is auditioning like now for the shows?
Unfortunately, for this time of year, pilot season, it's been pretty good. Like, you get to actually go in and read with casting and maybe like a producer or writer in the room. But a lot of times, because shows are cast out of New York or Vancouver, or you do a lot of self-tapes. So I go to a place, I have a system at home, I can do it too, but I just don't like to bother my wife to make me to be a reader. So it's actually kind of nice. You get to go in and you can take as many takes as you want, and it costs a few bucks, and then they send you a copy of it and you forward it into your manager and they forward it in like you auditioned for them. It's really interesting.
Now, do you get a perk just because you've been in so much? Do they put you more at the top of the list than others?
I hope so. Sure.
Help.
I have my manager is amazing, and it's a pretty big company, and they have some pretty big actors. So what I know that they do sometimes is like, hey, we've got this guy who's really famous. Mm-hmm. Here's his tape, and here's Mitchell, who you like. I know you're gonna like him, but just take a look. So a lot of times, because the larger companies have power and they have clients that are going to be on a show or be a star, be people that are recognizable in public, or more recognizable, if you will, that you get seen. I mean, they watch it, and then you get a notice saying, hey, they sent it to producers or they sent it to the network or, whatever the process is, or hey, you got a job,
Through the process, do they kind of keep you updated?
It's horrible.
Oh no.
So it's no news is bad news.
Oh.
If you don't hear anything, you didn't get it. A lot of times what they do now, which is almost even more frustrating, so you go in and you put yourself on tape or you go into an audition and you're like, that was great. And like the kiss of death, by the way, in an audition room is you finish and it's basically like, we're looking at each other. It's like you finish and you feel so good about it, right? Or you're like, yeah, I don't think they're feeling that. And they're like, thank you. That was great. Thank you so much. And you're like, oh, that's so condescending, but thank you for telling me it was great, because I don't believe you. And then you're like trying to be honest with yourself. And then I usually reach out to my manager, like, hey, it went well. We did a couple takes. The producer was in the room or the director. Let them know what they're doing. So they'll follow up and say, hey, what'd you think of Mitchell? But a lot of times, the only time you're going to get a phone call is like, hey, you're on hold, or they put a pin in you. And a pin is an old way of, back when everything used to be paper headshots, they would get a cast and they would essentially say, like, okay, here's our cast. And then they would put up your picture and they'd pin it up there and say, okay, he's pinned for this role. And then that would be it until they went and got network approval and all that stuff. You were pinned. So they still use the term. It just means you're one of the choices and they're going to get approval, which means you usually get a job when you get pinned, usually.
How much lead time do they give you if they say, hey, you're going to be on this episode of Bones? See you in 5 minutes.
Oh, you mean to audition or to be on it?
Once you get the part, how much lead time do you have to prepare? Like, hey, I'm going to be on this show this date.
It'll depend. I mean, some stuff they're like, hey, we got to travel you. But I've got a job and then work the next day. Call at 2:00. Got to get a call at 2:00. Hey, congratulations, you got. I think of what it was. Oh God. The only comedy I've ever done, like the multicam I did. I remember I was literally on the freeway on my way to do another job, and I get a call and they're like, "Hey, you got Still Standing," and I was like, "Great." And they're like, "When?" I'm like, "When do I work?" They're like, "What time do you wrap tonight?" And I was like, "I don't know." And they're like, "Tomorrow morning, 9:00." And I was like, "Great, see you tomorrow morning." And so while you're on your way to set to do, I was doing literally a one-liner, two-liner on the OC, which was a weird thing. I was getting calls from Still Standing going, hey, what are your sizes? We're going to start putting together your wardrobe. What time can you come in tomorrow? That kind of stuff. Like first rehearsal's at 10. So you're literally doing like two jobs at once, which is amazing. Like it's the best feeling in the world. But some days it can be quick. Some days you're like, I'll see you in 10 days. Like I did Zodiac, and it was probably the longest audition process in the history of auditioning for me. And it ended up being probably the least amount of screen time I've ever had, but it was probably one of my most proud jobs, if that makes any sense.
Wow.
So I went in and read. I was newish to LA. I didn't start acting until I was almost 30. So I was here maybe like 2 years, and I get an audition for this David Fincher movie. And I remember I'm in class, and I work it in class with some friends and my teacher, and I go in and I read. And the casting director's kind of like, huh, you're interesting. I like you, and we stayed in there for a while, and I read. Don't hear anything. A week later, I get a call. Can you come back in? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I came back in to read the same part again. And in the room is now David Fincher. And I'm like, this is cool. And I read, and I was with him for 20 minutes. Film directors are amazing. They want to take their time. They want to get to know you. They want to see you do different things. And the whole time he's kind of like, couldn't. It's like, thanks so much. We had a great time. I walked out. I'm on cloud 9. This is great. I got a great appointment. It was wonderful. 3 weeks later, I get a call. from the same office. Can you come back in for a different part tomorrow? Yeah, no problem. I work it. I go in. David is not there. I read it with casting. They have very specific notes. I did it. Nothing. 3 weeks goes by.
Good God.
I get a phone call. I'll never forget. I'm in an editing room and I'm working on my demo reel, and I get a phone call from my agent at the time, and he says, "Hey, you need to be at Lorraine's office tomorrow at 10:30." I said, "For what?" It's like Zodiac, and I was like, "Again? Didn't they start shooting like 3 weeks ago?" He's like, "Yeah." And are there any sides, any material? Nope, you'll get it when you get there. Okay. Drive over to his office in Hollywood. I pull in. I get led into the gate. I get up to the door. Nobody's there. I call my agent. She's on her way. She's on her way. 10 minutes later, the casting director shows up, walks in, frazzled, just dropped her kid off at school, like every parenting thing at the time she was doing, and walks in and hands me this script like this, like a 2-inch thick script with all these pages in it. And I said, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "What am I reading?" She's like, "Here, go to this thing." And she pulls open a page. She's like, "David really likes you. He wants to hire you. He just wants to see you do this before he can hire you." And I was like, "Okay." So I read this thing. Ends up being like a nothing. I got to wear the coolest wig, and it was weird. But I ended up playing this reporter. Nothing part. Basically a couple monologues, and I turned to Jake Gyllenhaal. I said, "And how'd you do it?" Whatever, that was it. And I leave. I get a call 2 hours later. "You got it." Great. When do I work? "You work Monday." Sunday, I get a call. "Hey, you're not working Monday. You're working Wednesday." Cool, no problem. I get a call Tuesday night. "Hey, the part's been written out. Sorry." "No worries." Cool. I get a call Friday. "Hey, the part's back on."
Oh my God.
To the point of like, I was just like, I don't even know. Like, I can't even. And then I ended up going to work. I did it. I was there for like, 4 or 5 hours. We did it 1,000 different ways. And then when the final edit, I'm essentially on a TV in the movie, voiced over for 90% of it. And then they pan up to the thing. And there I am with this horribly bad strawberry blonde wig. "How did you do it?" That was it. Like, it was mostly voiced over. But I was like, shit, I'm in the movie, like, it was great. But that audition, I mean, it was probably like, 2 months, 3 months of just stuff. So you never know, and you can never take it personally, right?
Yeah.
It's just a weird business. That was a really long story, and I hope that made sense.
The story showed us the angst you have to go through to try to get just a small part in a movie. Yeah. That's the tip of the iceberg that everyone else doesn't see the full iceberg.
Right. Yeah. But then there's times you're sitting there and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? You got an offer." Like, great, I'll go work. There's no rhyme or reason to this. And as soon as you think you figured it out, unless you're Tom Hanks or somebody, like, there really is no way to understand like how this works. So as soon as you think you're like, got it figured out, they're like, "No, you don't."
And you and Tom Hanks both are in self-quarantine right now, so you're both like this.
Like this close. I'm like, what? Except he has coronavirus. I don't. I'm just being safe. But yes.
That's true. Yeah, and he has maybe a little more fun doing what he's doing right now than you maybe in Australia getting to film a movie until they took that away.
Yeah, I know. He's doing okay. I think he's gonna make it. I think his career is gonna hold on.
He may be doing all right. But speaking of fun, you've been on so many different types of shows, from The Comedy Is Still Standing to Chuck to General Hospital.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
To, again, the OC, CSI, her favorite show, Bones.
Oh, that was fun.
What shows were the most? Oh, and Castle. Yeah. I love one of my favorite shows. What shows stand out as some of the most fun experiences for you?
They're all fun in different ways. Cold Case was great because it was my first big guest star, so I always kind of remember that. And I played baseball in college, And I used to work in sports before I became an actor. I worked in the NFL. I worked for Adidas. And when I came home and I told my dad I'm going to quit sports and I'm going to go to Hollywood, he looked at me like, what are you doing? And like my first big guest star, like big chunky role was playing this 1945 very racist baseball player that sort of like melded my two worlds together. So my dad kind of goes, oh, okay, I got you. So that job, Mad Men was awesome. It ended up being a lot smaller than I initially thought it was going to be. And then the show called Life. Do you remember the show Life on NBC?
But that was that a drama?
It was a drama with Damian Lewis, who's now on Billions. And it was awesome. The work was great. The people were great. I loved what I got to do. It was late nights. We were working on Hollywood Boulevard at this bar. So like we'd go outside and get like a cup of coffee at craft services, and there'd be like tourists walking by to like, who is that? Who's there? Who's working? you just kind of feel like really cool, because at the end of the day, it to people that are here from wherever they are walking down Hollywood Boulevard as tourists, to see an actual film production and see a couple actors walk out, they don't know who you are. Maybe they recognize Damien, but like you're really in this kind of unique spot. Like I always remember that one because it was so cool, the location and where we shot at in Hollywood, and it was just really, really neat.
To me, it'd be exciting, to just kind of be in there and yeah, like you said, with all the lights and stuff and, people watching you, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm famous. You just don't know.
Listen, any actor who tells you they don't like to be looked at or noticed is lying to you. There's a reason we're all doing it. Like there was a point in somebody's life where they did a play and everybody went like this, and then you go, oh, I can do that again,
Yeah, they love me.
It's kind of like the old Kent State days. It doesn't matter if you're the star, you're on the field and people are cheering and you're in the show.
Right. And that's I think that's fun. Life was awesome. Mad Men was super cool just because of the show, and it's just so great. I mean, like the period shows are cool because they do, like Mad Men was so specific, And I remember the wardrobe in that I got to wear this super vintage like $1,000 Beatles jacket. And the costumer was like, every time we'd stop and do like a reset up a shoot or something, she'd be like, take it off. Like, don't drink coffee, don't maybe take it off, And so that was pretty neat. Yeah.
So I've been wanting to ask you, and I know we can go back to this because I have a couple of notes here, but you have a nickname that you got.
I got a lot of nicknames. Go ahead. I know.
Oh, so you have a lot. Well, there's one in particular that I read.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of curious why you got it. Stinky.
What?
Yeah. I didn't put that on IMDb, but a lot of my friends in graduate school, that's what they called me because my last name was Fink, and I might have not been the cleanliest human being to hang out with, and so maybe there was some inside jokes there, but back in graduate school, I remember my friends, my buddies that I lived with through my 2 years in graduate school that was a nickname I had. And to this day, my buddy will still call me up and, hey, Stinky, what's going on? And so it's kind of stuck. Luckily, it hasn't really carried on too far here in Hollywood.
Oh, well, I just pretty much brought it back up. So I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, you don't want to put the label Stinky on your audition tape when you turn it in.
It'll get me work. It doesn't matter to me.
You never know.
You're right. You never do know.
Are there any crazy moments that have kind of happened? I know we talked about some of the more exciting positive shows you've been on. Has there ever been a show you've been on, you're like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah. I was doing a show, and I don't want to name it because I'll give away the actress, but a show is like a family or in anything. Like the number one on the call sheet, whoever that person is really dictates the tenor of the show. For example, doing Life, Damian Lewis, he's the number one on the call sheet. He is extraordinarily giving and really warm and very cordial. And so when you're on set, that sort of permeates the set, right? I worked on a show where the number one was not very nice. And the number 2 might have been more horrible. So I get a job, and a friend of mine gets the guest star next to me, and I'm on trial, and he's my lawyer. And a friend of mine is directing. I walk in and I sit in a chair, and my buddy and I are laughing. We talk to the director, and sitting over here is the number 1 on the show, the number 1 and the number 3. They're not talking to each other at all. The number 1 has her face in some Us Weekly magazine. Never says hello. Never. Never. Didn't even look over. We did rehearsal. Did not say hello. And I was like, wow. And it's kind of weird because you don't want to be like, hey, I'm Mitchell. You kind of like sometimes take their cue from them. Like maybe they're really in deep preparation. I don't want to, it's your show. It's your house. I'm a visitor in your home kind of a thing. By the end of the day, neither one of them had said hello to either one of us. My buddy and I were like, what is happening? And then I asked my friend who was directing, I said, what's going on? He just rolls his eyes. He goes, oh, it's going to get worse. Just wait. And I was like, what? And he goes, just wait. Just watch. She's like, she'll blow up. Oh, and so she wasn't super prepared. And she had this huge monologue and got up to do it. And you could tell, and everybody else, so the guests were super prepared. And she got up, and every time she would walk to do it and hit this mark, you could tell she didn't know her lines very well. And she would just scream, who's making noise? Like she'd get, I got to go back to 1. And she would go, I need a minute. And she would like go in her sides and like work on them, right? Because she wasn't prepared. Wow. Again, at this point, we might have nodded to each other. The second to last day on the thing, it was a Friday, and I remember I had to come back and work on a Monday. And I was almost pretty much done. I'd done all my long stuff, and the rest was just going to be some small bits here and there. We are pushing up against lunch. And, this is a union job, so when lunch is, you get those guys come in at 7, lunch is at, 12, exactly on the nose. Not a second later, not whatever, that's lunch. So we were pushing up against lunch. And so they got permission to push lunch a little bit because we were switching locations after lunch. They wanted to get it all done, go eat lunch, have an entire company move to another set, on the lot. She blows a gasket, literally spends 5 minutes yelling at everybody who would even approach her. And and I'm sitting there going like, what is going on? Like, I don't care. It's lunch, man. It's like a chicken breast and broccoli. Like, what are we upset about? She freaks out and she says, like, they're like, look, it's going to take like 10 minutes. No big deal. We'll do this. It'll be fine. Out loud in front of like everybody who's working is like, the masseuse will leave.
Oh my God.
And I was like, huh?
That's the best.
So apparently she had a masseuse in her trailer at lunch, and he would have left if she wasn't there right at. And so, I mean, literally, we were all just kind of looking around going like, what is happening right now? Like, this is amazing. Like, I love this. This is what you dream of, like, being a part of. Sometimes you're like, this is going to be a story for the rest of my career. You could tell it, it's great. So, yeah, that was weird.
And you got a front row seat to that, because I would love to just sit and watch, not be a part of it.
I just sat there and was like, wow, this is happening. But you also learn, like, if you're the number 1 or 2 on a call sheet, you really dictate the tenor of the show. Her attitude the whole time, the closed offness with us as a cast, though, permeated to everybody. Everybody was a little bit like, ugh. And the show wasn't very good. And it's not good, but like, whatever. We're making a living. Like, we're acting. It's not the end of the world. So it was educational, because I will never, ever see her in anything and not go, God, I wonder if she's still horrible. Right?
No.
But most people are amazing. So it's like the one or two that stick out. You're like kind of like, all right.
Well, being on Castle, I've been told through, actually, I think it was C. Thomas Howell, that when he did he did a bit part in Castle, that Nathan Fillion was very generous, and he sent him a basket and, made him feel really comfortable. And did that happen for you when you were on the episode?
I didn't even work with Nathan. Another friend of mine was on it, and I had a good relationship with the show throughout the thing. And I remember reading for the pilot, and you finally get a job that was an offer. That was one of those ones like, here's a job. Like, great. Got to work with Lance Riddick, who I got to work with on Bosch, who was from The Wire. But at the time, like, it was great. And I wasn't working with Nathan, but I remember going down to craft services, and he was just started his day. And he's like, hey, what's going on? How's it going up there? And I was like, it's great, man. Thank you so much. So he was super, like, thanks for coming to our house, man. Hang out. Like, I hope, don't put your feet on the furniture, but, like, definitely have a good time, but you could feel that, and that's why the show was on the air for 8 years, and Stana was exceedingly giving, much more like closed off. The day we were working, she had a lot to do. So you're like, just, get in your bunker, but was so professional and so sweet. And then so giving in the moment in the work. But she was also like, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much for being prepared and doing it. And Nathan was like the big guy. Hey, come on. And you're like, oh, no wonder the show was on the air for 8 years, right? I mean, that's because people liked coming to work.
Yeah.
And it shows.
Fun atmosphere.
Yeah. Now, we've touched on some interesting stories, a lot of highs.
Uh-huh.
Got us the show. You knew it was coming. It's my big break almost. Which ones kind of just nitpick at you that you almost got that just didn't happen for you?
I've had some close calls. I have tested for some shows. One show in particular, I remember I tested for it. The day of the test, my buddy walks in. He's testing for it as well. And I'm like, man, And I went in the room and I crushed it. Like, I crushed it. I know I crushed it. My friend was a reader. She's smiling at me while I'm reading. Like, I know I'm hitting it out of the park. And you're in front of studio and network people are in the room. Like, they're basically signing off who's going to get the job today. And it's for a large sum of money. I mean, this would have been it. Like, oh my God, I'm on a series and the show was going to be good, I think. And it was on the air for a while. And I walked out and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. I'm going to get on a series. This series is going to be a hit. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to parlay this series into directing. And then I'm going to parlay directing into, producing. And then I'm going to get another offer to do another show. And I'm going to become George Clooney. And not that it was, but jokingly. And 2 days go by, like, hey, they're still deciding. My manager at the time was like, they're still deciding. I'm like, and then I finally got the call, hey, they're going a different direction. And my buddy ended up getting it. He was the other direction. And the show went on to be on the air for quite a while, and he went on to buy big houses and make quite a bit of money. And I remember I thought, God, that's the end of my, like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? Like, that one, like,
Two questions.
Yes.
Is, if you can share the name of the show.
I cannot.
Is he still your buddy?
He is still my friend. That's the great thing about this. I don't know. You guys talk to so many actors. I don't know if this ever comes up, but when you're younger and you start off, it seems very competitive. And it's like this massive pool of people. And then the older you get, less people leave the business. And then there's like a group of guys. And I read with the same guys. And we're friends. You know what I mean? Like, and I see guys and I'm like, oh, like, I go in and read and I'm like, I'll text a buddy of mine now, knowing it has nothing to do with me. Hey, man, are you reading for this? And he'll say, yeah, I'm reading for it tomorrow. All right, cool. Because you're really much more right for it than I am. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm still friends with the guy. And because if you are truly your authentic self in an audition, only you can do what you can do. Mm-hmm. And your friends, sometimes I have actor friends of mine, I'm like, I see parts and I'm like, God, if he reads for this, he's going to get it because this is his wheelhouse, right? So you just, you're still friends with people and you kind of, wish each other well because there's less of you here. You're all older. You've been doing this for a long time and you're friends with each other. And, everybody has a family and a house and a kid and, or kids, and you support each other the best you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is positives though, because you have a couple of things that or you're either working on or about to work on. Tell us about those if you would.
So yeah, I'm excited. I think next month, Bosch season 6 comes out. I will be in that. I'll be in episodes, I think 4 or 5, maybe 4 of the episodes. I'm not sure if the 5th one's going to make it or not. Super awesome. Got to work with Lance Reddick, who I worked with on Castle. He was on The Wire. And I got to work with a woman named Daya, who her husband I worked with on Cold Case years ago. So like it becomes this really small thing, but it was great because it was my first job back from cancer, and I got to play this super semi-sleazy but somewhat charming kind of like money man in the political world in Los Angeles. So that was awesome. I got to do that, and it's pilot season, so I'm kind of running around right now, doing stuff for that, and hopefully there's a couple things that we'll get good news on next week or so.
I'll cross my fingers for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to get out of quarantine, get in a nicer hotel.
I know. How long are you going to be in
I'm
there?
gonna stay a couple days until my daughter her cold maybe goes away. I don't think anybody in my family has the coronavirus. It's just with my immune system still not being 100%. I kind of wanted to just, my wife's like, I'll feel better if you're not home, and I'm like, that's fine. I'll go sit in a hotel.
So she says that to me all the time too.
Yeah.
I'll feel better if you're not home.
How did you guys? Can I ask you guys a question? How did you get into doing this? Like, why this pot? Him? Yeah.
I appreciate the question, though. It's my fault. If you can't sleep at 2:00 at night, I was wondering what happened to the kid who came in second for the role of Harry Potter. Is he driving a truck? Is he still acting? It just bugged me about the almosts. So then I started thinking about it. And I used to do television locally as a broadcaster for about a decade.
Sports, by the way.
Yeah, sports. So that's why I was a big fan of reading that you used to, work for Cleveland Browns as well. And so I thought, hey, this would be a fun way to kind of get back into broadcasting.
That's really cool. That's a really neat thing. When you guys reached out, I was like, God, that's such a cool thing. I'm like, I wonder how you ended up doing this. But I mean, like, I ended up acting because I always tell this, and I think we're of the same age bracket where you'll get this joke. By the way, I've said this exact same, and I'm setting it up horribly. I've said this exact same joke to people who are like 20 something. Like, how'd you get into acting? I was like, oh, well, look, I have an MBA and I was going to be this. And I always go, the best way to explain it is I wanted to be Jerry Maguire. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be an agent or like a front office executive, right? I wanted to be Jerry Maguire. Yeah. And then when I got that job and I had, all the perks of the NFL life and a car and a nice place and season tickets and all that stuff, I realized I wanted to play Jerry Maguire. And I was like, yeah, I don't like suits and ties aren't my thing, but I certainly like makeup's cool. Like, let's do that. And that was literally how it happened. Like, it was the same thing. You're like, you had this idea of going, I wonder, like, yeah, that would be cool. Let's try that. Now, I miss the steady paycheck, but other than that, it's awesome.
I agree with you because, talking to all the fascinating people doesn't pay the utility bills, but the stories we get from getting to talk to you, to me, are priceless because that's what I'm going to take away from this whole experience.
I think that's, at the end of the day, anything creative, anything. And I honestly say this with all sincerity. I think finding acting when I did, I was 20. I was Fonzie in 6th grade. And then I did a couple plays in high school, but sports were kind of my thing. So I fell into sports. And I was working for the Browns, and my girlfriend at the time was like, you need a hobby or you're going to you're going to kill yourself. Like, you're a mess. Like, you're stressed, you're working too much. And I was like, And I was like, oh, I did a play in high school. She's like, well, do something. And I was like, great. So I did a play. I was, an executive, and at nights I'd run off to this little theater outside of downtown Cleveland, and I would do, you know, do a play. And I loved it. And she said to me, she was like, you know, I've never seen you so happy. And that was really the decision. Like, I think acting and art and having conversations like this is so important. And art to me is like, I think probably what saved my life. I mean, at least mentally. And what's great, and I'm sorry for keeping you guys this long, I'm quarantined, you know. So the guys that I went to graduate school with, one of them he's become Jerry Maguire. He's basically a super high level executive in NASCAR. I think he makes a penny more than God, and he's quite successful. For as successful as he is, if I'm on TV and I know how successful he is, like I know like where he is in the scope of his business. If I am on TV and I have one line, it is to him the greatest thing that he's ever seen in his entire life. He will share that with everybody and anybody in his world. Here's this guy with like all this stuff that you think like, you know, materialistically wise, you go, this guy's super successful. Why would he care?
Yeah.
You know? And granted, we're friends, but like, it's amazing, like to run into friends of mine from that world to see how much everybody just like really secretly a little bit inside wants to be on TV, you know, wants to be famous, wants to have themselves publicly out there doing something creative, you know, artistically, being able to express themselves, whether it's writing, painting, acting, whatever it is. And I think that for me is really sometimes what keeps you going too.
Yeah, it's therapy for you.
Yeah.
To me, it would be.
It is.
It causes therapy, and it also is therapy.
if you're a therapist in Los Angeles, you make a lot of money. You're in good shape.
Maybe you can play a therapist. There you go.
I have.
Oh, perfect.
I played a psychiatric ER doctor on the show Luck on HBO.
Okay, I can see that.
The irony is like I've been open about like my struggle with depression and things like that through my life, so I'm very public about that, and I think it's important to talk about. I was going through a really, really bad patch, and I remember like talking to my girlfriend at the time, and she says, "Oh, you know, like if you don't get out of this, you know, I don't know what I'm gonna do." And she's like, and she looked it up. She's like, "There's a thing called the 5150, and we put you in a psychiatric." I'm like, "I'm not that bad." And she's like, "No, but I don't know what to do. Like you need to." And I'm like, "Yeah, I got to go back to my therapist." Well, lo and behold, like 3 weeks later, I get an audition for a job playing a ER psychiatrist who talks about putting somebody in a 5150.
Oh my goodness.
The ability to go, God, I know what that would look like, and I know it's just a weird business. You know, your life sort of mirrors what you get opportunities to do.
That's incredible,
well,
though.
It's hard to kind of see yourself in a predicament, you know, from an outsider's point of view.
Right.
But then I guess it seems like, you know, when you put yourself as that outsider's point of view, playing the doctor, then it's like, oh, you know, it kind of makes sense now.
Yeah, and that's the thing about film and TV in particular, but like you get invited into people's homes, you know, like you're a part of their experience, you know. And they get to learn with you and share with you and experience with you. And it's like, you really become kind of part of their day to day, you know? And it's cool. And then like the great thing, you get to just learn about stuff, like stuff that you never get to do.
You get to live a lot of different lives, basically.
True. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But yeah, definitely.
Well, this has been so much fun, though, to get to live vicariously through you with all the different experiences you've had. Can't wait still to follow your career because, you know, you're still in the middle of it now. You got a long way to go. So I hope you're gearing up for round 2.
I am. I appreciate it. This has been great. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk to you. And it's really cool what you guys are doing. It's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, we've had so much fun. And we just, you know, we're running out of time because if we don't hurry, the masseuse will leave.
Listen, that was a big deal to her.
This has been a blast. Thank you so much. Wish you the best in your quarantine and in your career.
Definitely. I appreciate it. You guys are great. I appreciate you guys doing this. And thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate you. Bless you. Have a great day. I can't believe he gave up a big career in sports to start a brand new one in something definitely secure like acting.
Of course you'd say, I can't believe he gave up sports.
It was football.
Yeah.
But
baseball, right?
I mean, he played baseball. But it just shows you that if you're successful in one field, you can be successful in another because you take that same work ethic. Because he's a very successful actor. In my opinion, to be in that many shows, that's a big deal.
The fact that he expressed how much, not necessarily pressure he was under, but stress at the job and having depression and just not knowing how to deal with it. I mean, it is kind of not worth it.
I agree. You get one life, and now he gets to live many lives as an actor.
And he seems happy being in that hotel room all by himself.
He does. He was so great to talk to, but I like it because he was a captive audience. So we got to talk to him, and he couldn't go anywhere.
I know.
We had him all to ourselves. And the stories he got to share with us were really interesting behind the scenes stuff that we're never going to get the chance to see.
He was very detailed in that, which I enjoyed because I still want to know about that world. I love it how he calls the sets that he's on, I'm in their home.
That's a great way to put it because I never would have thought of that. And to me, one of the biggest takeaways, I had no idea when you watch a show that the number one or number two person sets the tone for the entire show. They have that much power on how that show's going to go.
And how we do this podcast, we set the tone for you. And hopefully you stay with us for most of that time.
Whether you're driving the car or watching us on YouTube, I hope that you're having as much fun as we are trying to learn about a whole new world that none of us get a chance to experience ourselves.
So true. Put it so well.
Thank you. One of us is a genius.
Yes.
And so humble.
It's me.
So thanks so much for spending your time with us, with myself and my genius, humble co-host.
Of course.
And I hope you join us next week. Again, we will be on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, Google.
Subscribe to us. Leave a review. That would be great.
Please. We would love to hear from you.
I would love comments, good or bad. You know, I can take constructive criticism or just criticism.
I'll take anything, really. I'm that desperate. Hope that you guys join us next week. Thanks so much for being a part of it this week. And again, we'll see you next time on My Big Break Almost.